has an answer. The food industry and group donations provide resources to the Metrolina Food Bank. The food bank then distributes the food to nonprofit agencies serving the needy in 19 counties. Last year, they collected 4.5 million pounds of food, enough to feed 4 million people a hearty meal. Support the Metrolina Food Bank.
When the black of hurricane night gave way to the gray morning after, Charlotteans were astonished at the damage. Giant plate glass windows blown out uptown, many of them dozens of stories above street level. Traffic control practically non-existent. So much debris on some streets it looked like a green snow. Trees down everywhere, many on houses in older neighborhoods like Myers Park, Dilworth, Elizabeth. What was it like here in Dilworth early this morning?
Very scary. The wind, the roar of the wind, it's unreal. It was just like a whoo, just all night kind of, you know.
Even before the rain stopped, scores of city crews began hitting the streets to clear the roadways.
I said, we got our work cut out for us now.
City officials say it may take months to clean up hundreds of downed trees, starting with those on the largest thoroughfares. But the city arborist says much of the damage to trees is yet to be apparent.
It's going to shorten the life of a lot of the older trees because of large limbs being broken out and decay and things getting started in the trees. So I'd say it's a devastating impact.
To repair the mangled electric distribution system, Duke Power hopes to field as many as 500 to 600 workers, some on loan from power companies in other states. 200,000 Duke customers lost power.
Terrible. I don't want to see no more hurricanes.
Even as repairs have started, Duke is still assessing the extent of the damage. And it says getting all customers back online could take days.
First thing we have to do is get to lines like this. This is a primary line. This is one that is coming right out of the substation. We have to get these lines back up and working before we can start working on the secondary lines and the service drop right to the customer.
This is what Hugo sounded like last night as it made its way from the coast through Charlotte.
About 20 minutes ago, it was nice and calm, and all of a sudden, it just like everything broke loose.
This is what Hugo looked like this morning after a 5-hour visit. Trees slicing into houses, trees uprooted, and restaurant signs scattered about. Forecasters warned that Hugo was a deadly and powerful storm, but no one, even emergency management officials, thought the hurricane would pack such a punch this far inland.
They warned us it was coming. I tried to take some precautions where I parked my cars and that, but it didn't work. It woke me up about 4:35. It was so severe I couldn't sleep, and I don't think anybody else did.
This is the first hurricane I've been in. Or was it a tornado?
Rain and wind and just blowing and just very, very scary. A lot of noise, and we were just all real scared to death.
Hugo left the entire town of Newton without electricity. Despite the efforts of city crews who worked to clear the streets once the rain stopped, the outlook for restoring power quickly isn't good.
We were out of power since probably around midnight, maybe a little after. And we probably will be 2 or 3 days without power, I'm guessing.
Hugo's ferocity continued as the winds buffeted Caldwell County, spawning at least 2 reported tornadoes, downing more trees and power lines, but sparing most homes.
First time I had ever seen one, and the trees were just kind of twisting and turning, and they just started falling and laying down, and it was scary.
The damage from the wind turned most of the roads into obstacle courses, making a long day for DOT road crews.
About every road around here has trees on it.
Jim and Jan Hill spent the night not only fearing for their lives, but for 20,000 chickens in 2 coops near their farm. The coops were not heavily damaged and few chickens died, but the feeding system is all electric. Without power, their losses could be great.
It seemed to have weathered it all right, even though it did go through and open the doors and
scare them probably pretty much last night.
You got a problem seeding them, that kind of thing?
Yes, without any electricity, we can't get any feed to them. They will have water, but no feed.
The winds danced across Union County from Monroe to the northwest. This family was lucky. A mobile home with 3 people inside went untouched, while the adjacent barn was blown down.
Trailer sitting there, not a thing bothered except a couple of pine trees down beside it and an apple tree down behind it.
Charleston, South Carolina is famed for its fine old homes and gracious living. But today, the city showed a different face, one ravaged by Hugo. The worst storm of the century here split off entire stories of houses and peeled the tin roofs off of City Hall and the old market downtown. Boats moored offshore wound up instead in the middle of the road.
Well, it was like an atomic explosion, really. I mean, this tree hit the side of the house, and it shook it entirely.
500,000 residents were left without water or electricity, and one man died when his home collapsed.
He was trapped in a building that was demolished, and we had to dig him out.
Officials say the situation would have been much worse, but most residents left Charleston or went to evacuation centers. The city's business center was devastated, and the mayor announced today that National Guard troops will search for looters.
In terms of public safety, if we're going to err, it's going to be on the side of making sure that every eventuality is considered and that the city is safe.
In the meantime, Charleston began cleaning up and getting ready for the fall tourist season. This unexpected facelift could cost as much as $1 billion.
This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. A large part of South Carolina was officially declared a major federal disaster area today after a brutal early morning pounding by Hurricane Hugo. Buildings were flattened, streets flooded, homes washed away. South Carolina's governor called it the worst disaster he'd ever seen. The hurricane scored a direct hit on Charleston, doing heavy damage all along the lowland coast. Total death toll in the Carolinas, at least 10, most right in the Charleston area. Hugo then stormed upward, far inland, into Charlotte, North Carolina, still packing hurricane-strength wind. The hurricane's whirlwind trip northward over land sapped most of its strength. Hugo was downgraded this morning to officially a tropical storm, and tonight it's just another weather system, bringing some wind and rain to the north, but nothing like the reign of terror in the south. As predicted, the hurricane made landfall at about midnight Eastern Time last evening. Here's a sample of the sound and the fury. Those 135-mile-an-hour winds and the heavy rain took their heaviest toll right around Charleston. The hurricane blew in at high tide and, as had been feared, sent a wall of water, sometimes 20 foot high, rushing as far as 10 miles inland. CBS News correspondent Richard Schlesinger is on the scene. Richard?
Dan, good evening. The damage here in some parts of this area was appalling. There were some buildings that were not just destroyed, they vanished. This is what 135-mile-per-hour winds and 17 feet of water can do to a place. The barrier islands off Charleston were chewed up and spit out by Hugo on his way to the mainland.
Right now it's a mess. They've got power lines down. There's no power, no water, no phones.
President Bush has declared the region a disaster area. The National Guard has been called out to help the overburdened police. The islands off Charleston were cut off when the bridges were mangled. Emergency workers went by boat to see the destruction firsthand. What was here?
This used to be the landscape office. It was a building that was on that structure. And where that went, your guess is as good as mine.
John DeBajian spent the night hunkered down inside his house on Sullivan's Island in the middle of the hurricane.
It was a whooshing sound. That's all you could hear. It was whoosh and continuous whoosh.
DeBajian insists he wasn't scared. He risked his life because he couldn't find a hotel that would take his dogs. Hugo's blunt power caused erratic, sometimes peculiar damage.
I prayed and I asked the Lord, if he wanted the furniture, well and good, but please save me without any injuries.
The storm saved Mrs. Robinson's furniture, but took the walls. All over Charleston, Hugo changed the landscape. A restaurant here yesterday is gone today. A tranquil oceanfront neighborhood transformed overnight.
Officials in Charlotte, North Carolina report that the damage from Hugo and its hurricane-force winds there was the worst in at least 30 years, maybe 35 or 40. Most residents had never seen anything like it, and correspondent Bruce Hall tells us many were stunned with surprise. They never expected to see it today. Bruce?
Dan, people here were genuinely surprised. Charlotte is 200 miles inland, and no one here expected the full force of a hurricane to hit this city. Hugo was still packing 90-mile-an-hour winds when it rammed Charlotte shortly before dawn, the first hurricane ever to hit this inland city. Thousands were rousted from homes and hotels, including many who had come from the coastal areas, thinking they would be able to escape the fury of the storm.
Well, it's definitely not what anyone expected up here. We all thought we were too far inland to get this type of weather.
When the wind and rain stopped, residents could not believe the damage. Roofing and glass littered the streets. Windows were blown out of downtown skyscrapers. Streetlights and metal signs spun around and around.
It's terrible. It's a mess. It's like this all over. It's bad.
Century-old oaks were split in half by the storm, their leaves stripped away by the wind. Power transformers and electrical lines were strewn along sidewalks and streets. Homes and cars were crushed by debris.
Things are pretty bad out there. We still don't know the degree of the damages.
Tonight, Charlotte has been declared a disaster area, and the cleanup is underway. Residents are still asking the question, how the storm could still be packing such a punch this far inland.
Oh, I've always heard that Charlotte was just far enough out from the mountains and far away from the coast that we didn't get any really serious storms. But we got food and...
It's going to be another long night in Charlotte. The city is expected to be in darkness. The power company saying it will be several days before they can restore electricity to all of the community. And residents here are now familiar with the full force of a hurricane.
Before you choose a body shop to paint your car, ask a few questions. Do they care about the environment as much as your car?
Hi, Mr. Pressman. The tourist is all set.
Will the work be done at your convenience?
Okay, we'll see you at 1.
Are they preferred by corporations nationwide with dependability and service? And do they back their work
And any problem?
in writing?
Great, I will.
If you don't know, you better get Mako.
Good cooks have always depended on Red Band flour, and I'd like you to share your favorite recipes with me in my Carolina's Cooking with Red Band recipe contest. 13 semi-finalists win my new cookbook and a Top of the Day apron, and the grand prize is $250 and a guest appearance on Top of the Day. Entry forms and complete rules are available in this October 1st Sunday newspaper insert. Send your recipe, entry form, and proof of purchase